About 4 months ago, I went to Target with my pregnant wife and 2-year-old son. It was 8 o'clock at night, so the store was relatively empty. I was watching my son play in the racks as my wife shopped. About 10 minutes in, I noticed 2 men walking the same aisles as us. Neither of them had a shopping cart or basket, and they didn't seem to be actually shopping for anything. One had a hood on and the other had a baseball cap. I kept getting this weird vibe they were watching us. Because it was late, my 2-year-old started melting down because I wouldn't buy him another Buzz Lightyear toy. I told my wife to go check out and I would take my son to the car. On my way out, I noticed the man in the hood was trailing us. I exited the store and started making my way through the parking lot to our car. I kept looking over my shoulder and sure as shit, this guy was trailing me. When I got to my car, I doubled back around to the front and boom, he pops right out. At this point, we were alone in the parking lot, 10 feet apart, staring straight at each other. I was holding my kid and had no other way of outrunning this guy. In a very stern voice, I asked him why the heck he is following me. He says he wanted to make sure that the child is mine. He kept yelling, "Is that your kid?" At this point, I reached my hand under my shirt and placed it on the handle of my pistol, while still keeping it concealed. I tell him that this is my son and he needs to leave us alone. The man continues to insist that I might be abducting this kid. Every fiber in my body was telling me he was trying to take my son. I held my ground and told him to leave us alone or I was calling the police. At this point, he took off across the parking lot, got into a car and sped off. Very scary situation, but I'm just happy I went with my wife to Target that night. I used to work at Target in Melbourne back in 2003 when I was 18. I am not what you call an average female. I am 6'2", have lots of tattoos, and am not hard to miss if you were to come to the checkout. A quick layout of the store. It was 3 levels, including a basement level where the DVDs were and where I used to work a few shifts. The majority of the time though, I would spend working at the checkouts. One shift, an older man with gray hair and glasses came to the checkouts. The first thing I noticed is he didn't have any products to buy. He says, "Wow, you remind me so much of my granddaughter." Harmless, right? I smiled and joked about how she must be a great girl. Then began to ask me about my family and where I grew up, etc. Being from Adelaide, I knew I probably didn't know this man. It was weird but not unsettling. Thankfully, there were customers behind him and I politely said I need to get back to work. He smiled and said he might bring in some photos one day to show me. I smiled and he left. I didn't think about the encounter at all after that until 2 weeks later he was back. I wasn't worried, but just annoyed being 18 and not interested. He showed me photos of his granddaughter and family and there was a slight resemblance. Again, being a busy store, I had a lot of work to do and excused myself to get back to work. He stood in the store staring at me for a long while, which I noticed, and this was making me uncomfortable. My biggest mistake was not letting my supervisor know at the time. I didn't really tell anyone except for a friend who asked who he was. Skipped to 3 weeks later, and yep, you guessed it, there he was. But this time he looked sad. He managed to get me aside as I was walking to my break. The photos he showed me were of a funeral. First of all, who the heck takes photos of a funeral? Anyway, he said that his daughter and granddaughter were murdered by his son-in-law and he missed them very much. I kind of felt sorry for him, but then he said something that sent shivers up my spine. "I know that you're my granddaughter. I'm so happy to have found you again." What the actual heck? My face went red as it does when I get nervous. "I don't think so, sir." "I've missed you so much though." He began to cry and grabbed my arm. He tried to hug me, but luckily one of my tall managers walked by and I pulled away. "Hey, Grant. Do you still need help with that cage?" Grant looked confused, but he must have seen my unease because he nodded. "Yeah, that'd be good." I looked back at the crying old man and smiled nervously. We got in the elevator and I escaped upstairs. I then told my manager what was happening and they noticed how much this freaked me out. Thankfully, I didn't see this man for a few weeks. Having a week's holiday helped. A friend did say she saw him around, and he was looking for me. I came back to work, and not a week later, I came to the front register to start my shift, and I saw him. Luckily, he didn't see me. I stopped and headed back to the elevators. I found my manager and told him what was going on. He told me to go downstairs to the basement and stay there until he came and got me. I don't know what happened, except what I was told. Apparently, the man started yelling and saying that his granddaughter worked here, and started yelling that he needed to see me. The security and my manager tried for about 10 minutes to get him out of the store. He had with him photos, female clothing, and a bracelet. I can only assume they were from his granddaughter. He started screaming his granddaughter's name and had to be dragged out of the store. From that day on, I spent most of my time in the basement, working the registers there. I left that job to move back to Adelaide soon after. I did kind of feel sorry for the man, having suffered such a loss. He was obviously not accepting their deaths. This happened about a year ago, and I still have yet to return to the store without my husband. So last July, I took my then 4 and 6-year-old sons to Target to back-to-school shop. Since having kids and hearing all about these horror stories, I am very observant of my surroundings when out. Anyways, while at Target, like most women, I looked through all the sections. While in the women's clothing, I noticed 2 older men close by that kept looking over our way. I thought maybe I'm just being paranoid, so I kept going about my business but kept my boys super close. We go to the baby section, they pop up. Toys, makeup, and the same thing. I was feeling really uneasy because they seemed to be everywhere we were, and they never had a cart. One guy was holding one little thing. I go to check out and wait for a big group of nurses leaving Starbucks to walk out with. I threw the boys in the car without buckling them and locked the doors. As soon as I look up, the 2 guys walk out empty-handed looking around. I didn't think they saw me, so I started to leave when I looked in my rearview mirror and saw them behind me in a truck. I stopped right there and turned and took a photo so they could see me. They turn like they are going back to the store, and I park over a couple of stores down, where they can't see me, and call the cops. While I'm on the phone with them in a full-blown panic attack, I watch one of the guys change his shirt and go back inside. I waited until the police got there so I could make sure they were there and had the right guys. I don't know what their plan was that day, but my mama gut told me it wasn't anything good, and I'm so thankful my babies and I are okay. At the time, I was about 5, and I was living in an area of Florida that surprisingly was one of the most prevalent spots for human trafficking in the country, apart from the big cities. It's cleaned up now, but at the time, I thought the area was pretty nice. My mom has never been that great, so when she took me to Target, I pretty much knew the drill. No tantrums, no asking for things, and no wandering. I can't quite remember why we went to Target, but I remember us passing through the pillow aisle. Some part of my child brain wanted to test the comfort levels of all the pillows, so I kneeled on the ground and told my mom to wait. She stared at me for a few seconds and said something along the lines of, "Hurry up, I don't have time for this," before disappearing around the corner. I didn't really think she left me there on purpose. Maybe she thought I would get scared from being apart from her and scrambled quickly to follow her. I tested out 2 pillows before getting freaked out, and I went looking for her. She had vanished. I began to call out her name, and I remembered she told me to go to the front if I ever got lost, but the Target was so big that I got confused. A woman grabbed me by my wrist. She wore a bluish-green blouse and had dark hair, but I think it was a wig. It didn't look right. She started pulling me to the front of the store, and I began to cry really loudly. I shouted for my mom while this woman dragged me out, and we got to the automatic doors before my mom barreled out of an aisle and grabbed me out of the woman's grip. The woman ran out of the store quickly, and I only really remember this because of how my mom gripped my face and screamed at me to never walk away from her again, even though she left me. After that, I never wandered. She apparently forgot about this, but I recently learned that Targets are known for kidnappings. It's pretty strange to think what I might have been doing if that woman actually kidnapped me. Would I even be alive? I'm pretty sure if my mom hadn't found me a few seconds later, I would have been gone for good. My husband and I recently became the parents of our beautiful 2.5-year-old son. The last few months with our boy have been the best of our lives. For context, I am white, but my husband is from a country in the Middle East. Our son is a blood relative of his, so they are both ethnically Middle Eastern. About 6 weeks ago, I was running errands at a local Target with my son. We were just browsing while he was being his adorable self, playing with a stuffed animal. That was when a seemingly kind lady approached us to comment on how cute my son is. I didn't think much of it. He is extremely cute. I know every parent says that, but we do often get comments on how precious he is. I agreed with her, and she asked, Are you watching him?" Understanding she probably assumed I was a nanny or a babysitter because we are not the same race, I commented, "Well, I guess you could say that. I'm his mom." I assumed she would just accept this and move on, but she then seemed uncomfortable and asked our son something in Spanish. My son, who mostly speaks Arabic and is still very young, looked at her and understandably did not answer. She then frowned and walked away without saying anything else. While we continued our shopping, I noticed multiple times that she was nearby. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, but after a while, I started to get nervous and got the feeling that she was following us. She even stood behind me and waited to use the same self-checkout stand, despite the fact that there were other ones available to use, and that made me really uncomfortable. After checking out, I decided I did not want to immediately head to my car due to the weird lady and her strange vibes. I wanted to wait until she had hopefully left the store to head out. So we stopped at the Starbucks in this particular Target to get myself some coffee and a snack for my son. He got fruit all over his face and it was so adorable that it had to be documented. I snapped a quick picture of him to send to my husband. I had calmed down, all was well. Then, when I was cleaning up, I realized the same lady from before was sitting at another table just staring at us. At this point, I was extremely uncomfortable and I stared back, after which she abruptly got up and walked away, looking weirdly angry. I again tried to wait until she had hopefully left the store. Maybe 5 minutes later, just when I was getting us ready to leave, a security guard walked over and asked me to follow him. Thinking I had been mistaken for a shoplifter, I pulled out my receipt, but he continued to ask me to follow him, so I grabbed my son and did. In another room, I was questioned about my relationship with my son. I explained he was my son, but the security guard continued to pose questions, while another employee who had joined us just stood silently and observed. After a minute, I pulled out my phone and showed multiple pictures of my husband and I with our son. Thankfully, this satisfied him, but I was by this point extremely upset. I had a feeling that lady had made some sort of comment about me to the security guard, and after asking him multiple times, he essentially confirmed this. That another shopper had said I had a child who I was clearly unrelated to and seemed suspicious. The security guard thought that most likely nothing was going on, but for some reason still decided to bother my son and me and take us into a weird small office, which was extremely intimidating. The other employee there turned out to be the manager, and seeing I was upset and kind of offended that I had essentially been treated as if I had been doing something wrong, likely only because I'm a different race than my son, they apologized. I was tempted to be a bit of a Karen, but my son was clearly anxious about the situation and I just wanted to hold him tight and take him home. They walked us to the door and we did just that. This was overall a very nerve-wracking experience, and now I'm afraid to go anywhere alone with our son without my husband or brother-in-law. There was a large family resemblance with our son. I can only assume this woman apparently was ignorant of the fact that parents do not exclusively have to be biologically related to their children, and assumed I was in possession of a child who I should not have been in possession of. That is the only explanation I can think of. The way she followed us around the store makes my skin crawl, and remembering being taken into that little office in question makes me so uncomfortable.